Strange occurrences in funeral homes happens all the time. It's very, very weird. Happy Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, whatever day it is. It's one of the days that end in Y. Let me get my thing going here. I go into these rabbit holes. Let's just dive in. Apparently, funeral home owners are not the brightest. There's a crematory in Georgia, and this guy, who was a maintenance guy, started noticing what he thought were loved ones' bodies. Just it didn't go into detail, this story, but apparently there were like 300 loved ones that were, it's crazy, mixed ashes. And then the man that owned a funeral home got mad because his wife admitted to having an extramarital affair. And long story short, he kills her. This is a true story. If you're just joining, he buries her underneath an old lady in a casket. And then authorities are like, hey, we're going to check burial records because you didn't even tell anybody that she was missing. You just went about your stuff. Nonetheless, killed his wife, buried her with an 80-something-year-old woman. Crazy stuff. And then you have stories of crematories not even working and people taking loved ones' bodies and burying them, like 300 in the woods, or a crematory that's not operable and someone finds a leg in the woods. These are real stories, by the way. This isn't me just making stuff up. So this is just strange occurrences that happen in funeral homes. I mean, it takes one bad apple to ruin the bunch. That's what I was always taught. And then you have the story of the man that was a prominent owner of like a food store, wholesale food store. You can look this up. He's out of New York. He died, went to a funeral home in New York, and overnight, the next day, they go in and he's missing his head. And the funeral home was locked up. They have absolutely no idea. The caretaker had checked the locks on the property numerous times throughout the night, and they said it was from someone skilled. And they, to this day, have no idea what happened to the loved one's head and nor who did it. And then you have, of course, fraud stuff left and right. People, I know of cases within the state where you have people who sell burial insurance, like pre-need, and then will fake that loved one's death, produce a provisional, which is a state, like it's a county document to say this individual's died, and they send that in to the trust of the state of Kentucky, and they got money, lots of money. So like the efforts that these people had gone, and then I went down a rabbit hole, okay? And if you know nothing, and this is the first time to the channel, I'm Nathan. I spent 13 years in the funeral profession, a profession filled with incredible people, by the way. Incredible. There's literally like point this much of the bad stories like every other profession. And that's what I went into a rabbit hole. I was like, what are some bad, crazy stories and cases where? And if you want to ever get away with, the joke is, murder, then you befriend the coroner's office, someone in the coroner's office, because the coroner is the individual, if someone's dead, that's outside of the care of a doctor, they're the ones that pronounce people dead oftentimes. And if the situation looks, natural causes, then there you go. Not that I would ever do that, but nonetheless, there's also stories of, I'm trying to not make it so specific. I say the New York story because it's not to this day known, and it wasn't the funeral home's fault on this. But the funeral home, I won't say. There was a funeral home that did not get paid for services, so which I want to preface it. It's a for-profit business. Yes, it's a necessary service. It's a beautiful service, but it costs money. Like, you have to pay to get your service, right? And if you have a burial tomorrow, and today you said during arrangements, Nathan, I will bring you $10,000 tomorrow. Okay, well, I'll just take your word for it. You come, we're starting the service, and I'm like, normally you wouldn't talk about finances at the day of the service, but I say, as we discussed yesterday, you stated that you'd be bringing $10,000 for the service, and then they say, with everything going on, I forgot. Well, that happened. The burial took place. And then the family just didn't show up to pay, ever. And then when the funeral home called, they were like, we're not paying you. So this funeral home disinterred their loved one at the cemetery, took their casket, put the casket on the front porch. Because services were taking, like, what is your collateral at that point, right? Like, what could the funeral home have done? Obviously, I wouldn't be digging up a loved one, but apparently, allegedly, this had happened, and they took the loved one casket out of the vault, and they put them back on the loved one's front porch. You didn't pay for the service, so here you go, and then we'll take care of this whenever. How true that is, I don't know, but I think it is true. And then you have people who, you have stories all the time, like a pre-need burial, like a pre-need grave itself. You could buy the grave, but you can default on the payments, and then they'll just take the grave back and resell it again. That happens all the time. Or you have, the sea level. I think it's New Orleans, for instance. They'll sell a grave, and because of the way that the loved one's body decomposes over time, then they'll just resell that grave, and then they'll just keep going on top of. But there are a lot of strange occurrences that happen in funeral homes, for sure. I mean, that's why, if I'm not mistaken, the mafia, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of the mob, the mafia, and funeral homes / crematories, because we've all seen Ozark. Like, that is how you stash cash. You just put it in a mausoleum. Who needs a bank when you have don't take none of this. I'm not promoting any of this. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just sharing the stories. But I do want to know how the mafia was involved, especially in like New York and New Jersey, with regard to, they disappear, people who you were at odds with, they just magically disappeared. You own a crematory. Like, let's say you get pulled over and you have a deceased loved one on the cot in a transfer van. If you own a funeral home, you think the cop's going to be like, who do you have there? You could simply say, I'm returning from a transfer. They obviously will probably recognize you. They'll say, hey, Nathan, how are you tonight? Oh, I'm doing great. When all reality, you just take them to the crematory, put them in. No one's none the wiser. Again, not promoting that. I'm just saying that's probably what the mafia saw. And I don't know if you could use the carpool lane. That's a good thought. I mean, I wouldn't think so because, actually, I would think so. Yeah. But it goes back to the whole statement of me saying that you don't have to be a business person to be successful in this profession. But then you end up doing stupid things, maybe, perhaps. Interesting. And that doesn't even get you in the rabbit hole of all of the creepy things that happen at the funeral home. It's just very unique. It is. It really is unique. There are a ton of stories about whenever you were on call, some of the funeral homes would have beds, like bedrooms, and they would play tricks on each other. That's all I'll say. I can't really go into detail. This is before my time, These are all just passed down stories, right? These are all just passed down. Yeah. I hope you all have had a fantastic day. I'm really excited about January. I'm not trying to wish it to get to that point, but it's amazing that the songs that have been inspired and continue to be inspired by the works, and hearing stories, getting messages of people who have had recent loss, and just how the channel has offered them support, comfort, if only just a little bit. And then it's amazing how people in the profession use it and take it to this wholly different place that it didn't need to go or ever was intended to go. It's like yesterday on one of the platforms, this guy said something about how, the work speaks for itself. Maybe so. It's a thankless job, and was actually being very bully. And they're a funeral director in Virginia, right? And I have family in Virginia. I have family in the area in which this individual is a funeral director. Meaning, my point is they don't think about that. And so they're throwing these rocks thinking that they're being cute and sweet, but all I did was send a pretty sweet, kind text message saying, hey, I just want you to know, unfortunately, there are people in this profession who are not necessarily the most kind and are saying terrible things, and I don't feel comfortable in the event whenever you need a funeral home. If they're saying something about their own, no telling what they would say about total strangers that aren't in the profession. And they were like, thank you. We would never use that funeral home. That's my point. You never know. You never know. So you be kind to everyone. When I was growing up, my mother said, be nice to everybody. You never know who's going to be your boss one day. And that goes to, in 2014, there was an individual who lived with their grandmother. Grandmother raised them, and they didn't have many friends in school. And in high school, people were mean to them. And the grandmother died, and they called me, and they used our funeral home, and they said, I chose you because I knew you worked there, because you were the only person who was nice to me in high school. And they loved their grandmother like a mother. And that speaks volumes. Just because you don't live in Kentucky, or just because you don't know someone directly, you do not realize the impact, positive or negative, that you may or may not have. And so you should probably think before you speak. And this profession is filled with incredible people. It doesn't sound like I'm selling it well, because at the beginning I'm like, all these crazy things happen, but it's not all the time. But it's filled with incredible people. But then it's also filled with people who, a few who, want to keep it under a basket. And the person that talks about it, I don't know if it's jealousy. I don't know if it's fear. I don't know if it's boredom. I don't know what it is. I don't care to find out, but they want to throw rocks at their own, and it blows my mind. Nonetheless, don't talk ugly about people, because I might have family there in that area, and you just shot yourself in the foot, and the family won't call your funeral home because they know that you're an asshole. Don't be an asshole. Be kind, right? Be kind. Please remember, Blockbuster would say, be kind, please rewind. And for those who watch this, there's a thing once called VHS tapes. Yeah. Anyway. There was a funeral home that, hey, come here. There was a funeral home, I don't remember the state, but there was a mausoleum that was what's the word whenever it's like shut down, deemed what'd they do, oh my god, I can't think of the word, oh my lord. Nonetheless, this mausoleum, it was totally just dilapidated. I mean, the faces of the mausoleum were coming off, and so one of the people that owned it had died. And the perpetual care fund, because every cemetery has to have a perpetual care fund, someone stole it before they had died because they were in poor health and they weren't able to I don't know. It was not good. This place, I think you could find it on YouTube. It's not decommissioned. No, I can't think of it. Like, they shut it down. They deem it like, oh my gosh, I can't think of it. Words. My brain goes so fast, and I forget what I'm trying to say there. Anyway, I'm trying to think of other really wild stories. Like, in the movie Wedding Crashers, you see at the very end Will Ferrell's character is doing like the funeral crashing. I've never seen that. I'm going to say that. I've never seen that, but I'm sure it does exist. They say at weddings, people go to weddings, everyone gets a little loose, and everybody decides they want to fall in love that night. And I wonder if funerals, everyone's a little vulnerable, and I wonder if that happens. I'm not insinuating that it does, but I think about, that kind of thing. I do know that a man was driving the limo, and you have 1, 2, 3 seats, and then the second row has 1, 2, 3, the third row has 1, 2, 3. And he's driving. This funeral director told me this story. He said, I was driving, and the widow is in the passenger seat in the front. I don't know why they're riding in the front, because the hearse is in front, and the deceased is in the casket in the hearse, and she puts her hand on his leg, and he's like, yeah, so I guess she was, I don't know what she was thinking. I don't think maybe she was thinking, but it's a lot of unique stuff that happens in the four walls there. Or, well, they say, by the way, I might sound like I'm all over the place, but I'm reflecting on, crazy, strange experiences. or the saying is like, you know, if you want to make an ass out of someone, put a flower on them, like pin a flower. Yeah, I mean it's pretty it's pretty interesting to say the least. There was a funeral home that this isn't funny whatsoever. It's actually very scary. Well, I'll tell the funny one first. So processions, like you have the processions really long, and it's winding through the city, and it's going out to a county. And one of the funeral homes that I worked at before I was employed, their hearse broke down, and they stood on the side, sat on the side of the road for forever. Had to wait for the other hearse from the funeral home to finish the other funeral to then get to the procession. So this line of snaking through is blocking all kinds of traffic. You have your escorts that are trying to keep the traffic flowing. Apparently it was like an hour or more. And then you have the story of a few years back where someone had a medical emergency driving the hearse, and they go down the embankment off the road, and they're fine. The hearse was fine. The loved one in the casket was fine, but they had to, of course, tow that wasn't good. It added quite a bit of a headache to traffic as well. But back in the day, the funeral directors, what they would do is they would listen to the scanner. And this is true. So this is I guess this would probably be the 60s and 70s. I wouldn't think this happened up to the 80s, but they would listen to the scanner, and whenever there would be a vehicle fatality, they would announce it on the scanner, and the hearses, the funeral homes, would rush to the scene. So they would drive a ambulance hearse. And the first one to the scene got the loved one, like got the body of the loved one. This is a true story. These are true stories. This really happened. And so what they would do to really piss each other off is like funeral home A would show up, and funeral home B, so that they couldn't open the back of the vehicle, would park like this so that they couldn't open their door. They would open the door and get the loved one's body. Now, why did they want that? Is, of course, the call meant that the family would use them for the funeral home. The family would then buy a casket and pay for services. And then, of course, it meant future business. That is a true story. That stuff happened a lot. And I think that's kind of funny. It's like, I mean, it's like they're competing over your body. That's funny to me. And I'm sure there's a million more stories like that. There were stories of a funeral home that would take loved ones' bodies, instead of cremating them, taking them to, I don't know if it was another school or another funeral home or school, so I don't know this, but was taking it somewhere like, and these were Jewish loved ones that you don't embalm Jewish people, like you don't, and they were working on and practicing embalming with them. Yeah, and then you have funeral homes that, of course, like the funeral home in Colorado that had 100 and someone said 89 the other day, and it threw me off, but it's 191, I believe, loved ones that were not tended to, cared for. I mean, you have the ability to legitimately buy BUI body parts, like feet, arms, and medical schools will do that. And they were selling body parts. They were not that one necessarily. I don't know about that one, but I'm saying it's a real thing. It had been a real thing. That's why you have every agency you could possibly think of. You have the EPA that oversees regulates the crematories and making sure that that's, above board. And then you have the Attorney General's office. And then you have the state board of the funeral directors and embalmers. I mean, there are a lot of people that regulate the profession, because it just takes, some asshat like that to do terrible things. I mean, I don't understand why that would even happen. Like, where does it go wrong? This is like the serious Nathan now. It's like, what point does someone who's in a profession that's surrounded by delicacy and compassion and intentionality, where do they go to get to that point, to be like, okay, and justify it being okay once, and then going down this rabbit hole of saying, okay, 190 more times will be fine. Like, we'll make it up we'll make it up on this next one or on this next one. I stumbled upon the funeral home, and I went live like a week or two ago about these funeral homes that were shut down. And they'd go in and look, and there'd be bodies and caskets from like no telling how long. Like, why? Like, why was it better for you to say, you know what, we're gonna just leave this one here? Like, you could say it's financially they were strapped. I don't think that's not an excuse. It's not at all an excuse. But I would love to be in the psyche of and say, okay, that, I don't want to say that makes sense, but okay, I hear, like, what the fuck? Like, what are they thinking? So it just blows my mind to what point these people say, yeah, this will be okay. It doesn't make sense. Because you obviously got in the profession because you believed in helping people. And we all know what's right and wrong. We know it hurts. We know that this action or that action will hurt and have consequences. I don't know. It doesn't make a bit of sense. And then if I pivot, the scenarios of like the funeral home digging up the loved one, putting the loved one's casket, their intention was to make a point, hey, we carried out an incredible service. You didn't pay for the service. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you back your loved one, essentially, in their casket on the porch, and then you can pay for the service. And then we'll handle this. Like, there's no collateral of any kind, because a lot of times whenever a loved one dies and the family are saying, let's say they're going to pay for the funeral with proceeds from the insurance policy. Okay, so what if some weird random thing happens where a very prominent insurance company that you take an assignment for magically just shut down like the next day, and all the funds are frozen for a year, 2 years, 5 years? Like, how is it the family's fault, for one, but then how is it the funeral home's fault? So I understand this very delicate thing where services must be carried out. There's costs associated with services. Families get up front and it's just a unique dynamic. That's why it's so hard to talk about money with families, and that's why funeral homes require payment, because you can say all day long, I'll go home tonight, I'll get my checkbook, and I'll bring it tomorrow. Because you know what? One, they're not going to, even if they have good intentions to pay, because they're going to forget. They're stressed. I can't remember shit when I'm not stressed, let alone you add an element of stress and overwhelm. I'm not going to remember anything. And number two, they probably more than likely could maybe be lying to you and then giving you this sob story. And there are people in this world who do believe that they should not have to pay for funerals, and they do believe that the state or the city or the county pays for them. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense. It never will make sense for me or to. So some people just don't care, and that's sad. So that's why when you're sitting around the table with people and you say, how do you intend on taking care of services today? It's because of the bad apples, the one bad apple over there. Just like it's probably because of the one bad apple that dug a loved one up and put them on the front porch that funeral professionals have to walk even a more delicate line, as they should. Hold people accountable. That's great. I'm totally fine with that. But you can do so in kindness and compassion. I'm sure your profession has a lot of interesting, weird, unique stories. I am absolutely going to get off here and go into this rabbit hole. I'm gonna go into the rabbit hole of the mafia and funeral homes. I don't know if that'll be a good thing for the profession or not, but it's fine. It's not like it's just because somebody does it doesn't mean it represents me poorly. But I will report back on what I do find, and you could do the same. So I'm just glad that you had joined me, or that you watched tonight. And we have only a few more days until Christmas, and there's a lot to be excited for and anxious for. And I think about the kids and the people that are excited, but also think about the people who are sad and lonely. And that's what the podcast was about today. I was thinking about the people that I've tended to over the past 13 years. And this is the first year that I'm not on call. The first Christmas that I've not been on call in 13 years. And it's almost like, I don't want to call it like PTSD, but I don't know if I was having like I don't want to say like a panic attack. That sounds so dramatic, but my chest was heavy reflecting upon these people that are going without and reflecting upon the families who had these tragic events happen, and, you know, a seat at their table is empty. And is there Christmas merry? No. Will it ever be? Probably not. You know, I would just, it adds this element of, gratitude in this very odd way, mindfulness of what I have, what you have. I mean, even though we are filled with heavy moments and times and stress and probably money challenges or whatever, there's change constantly. Who are we to think that we're afforded and deserve a life without stress? So, but I can't imagine what these families who don't even have anything to be merry about. And maybe they do. I hope they do. But being the first Christmas I'm not on call, I have this sense of like just gratitude for a little extra time to not have to just be everything to everybody. And I have a conscientious, like a more aware of moments in the best way. I mean, like wrapping the boys' presents and being very intentional with what I got them, and not just getting them, something just because, that just, it adds a space under the tree so that every kid has the same number of presents. You know how parents do that. I do that, but I do it intentionally. And I'm excited to be able to sit in those moments and reflect. And to the families that don't have something to look forward to, I think about them an awful lot. And I hope you do too. And not to make you feel like sad and heavy-hearted all the time, but just being mindful and being, maybe intentional about going out of your way to just be kind to somebody, not only for yourself because it feels good, but maybe for them, and maybe in honor of someone you don't even know. I don't know. It's a ripple effect. So be mindful of the people that don't have, that are going without, that experience tragedy. And this holiday is just another reminder of an empty seat or a memory that's not to be. So I love the profession, and there's some crazy ass people that preceded us and that did some crazy stuff, but it makes for great stories now. So I hope that this Wednesday, I think, is it Wednesday? Tuesday? Wednesday, Tuesday? Tuesday. Whatever day it is. Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. I don't blink when I talk to you. Why? It's kind of like that woman that was standing behind Nancy Pelosi, that one video that keeps circulating. She was just like this. They were saying she's a robot. She's not a robot. Maybe she is a robot. Maybe she is. Maybe she's controlled by the government and she needed to get plugged back in. At least she wouldn't have to be embalmed. But you don't put her in the crematory because metal, it wouldn't be good for the retort, and the retort could explode. Anyway, happy Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day. And I'm going to go and research the mafia and crematories. All right, be kind so you don't have a story made up about you where you did stupid stuff. And if you did do stupid stuff, still be gentle with yourself.